Good
Yes.
evening. Good evening.
Good
Happy
evening.
Sabbath.
Shabbat Shalom. Happy Sabbath. And then I can see Sister Bongi there, Mama. You know, how are you? Long time no see. But then I can see the name, but I can't see the faces. Never mind. Never mind. Those are the old faces I've seen here, but I can see the name. And I'm sure that you can see me. You can see me. Praise be to God. And then I see Sunita, Sister Sunita there. Nice to see you, Sister Sunita. You know,
Hello, everyone.
wherever I go, I see you anyway. So God bless you. Well,
Thank you.
it's good to be here. You know, praise be to God, you know, to share the word of God with you. And especially in time like this. You know, without further ado, let's get in straight into it. You know, a few months ago, you know, our world plunged into a darkness. People all around the globe were confused. Science and technology could not help. All of a sudden, many people have lost their lives, and many have lost their loved ones. And many people were confused and they did not know how to deal with the whole situation during this pandemic. Some panic buying, you know, tissue running out, you know, in the supermarket, you know, many things you could not get. It was just people were confused. The world was in a lockdown. Many people were grieving in isolation, you know. Losing someone we care about is never easy. But during this pandemic, it was much, much, much harder for both those who have lost their loved one and also for those who has been reminded of their previous loss. So hard. For many of us, the natural response after losing someone important to us is to turn to some friends, to some relative, or to some family around us, or neighbors, because we're searching for comfort. But when we are being asked to limit our social contact with others, you may feel like you need to cope on yourself. You're on your own, you see. It seems like you have a dual citizenship and suddenly you move to the different world. A very difficult time. This can be especially difficult if you have lost someone you share a home for years. And now you're trying to adjusting yourself in that situation, in that environment. You see, many people experience guilt after losing someone important to them. And many question whether they could have done more, you know, to help the loved one. This can be especially difficult if you aren't able to spend much time with the person, you know, during their final days or weeks. And if you were not able to give them a good send off they deserve, because many people could not do this because of the guidance. We couldn't even go to the hospital. This might also lead to feeling of frustration, even anger at everything going on and how it affected this time for you and especially for your loved one. You know, in the early days of this pandemic, it touched my heart. I was, you know, still so many members in London have lost their loved one. If you lose, you know, some of them said, share the story with me. If you lose someone you care about during this time, you may also be unable to attend their funeral and celebrate their life in the way you would like to. Your loved one would go to the hospital and they won't come back home and you will never see them again. The hospital, what they will do there, those nurses, they will just cut a little piece of their hair, some of the hair strand, and they will put it in an envelope and they will send it to the family. And the body had to be disposed as an abnormal manner. This can be really upsetting. And you may feel like you haven't had a chance to properly say goodbye or to process the loss. Well, this evening you might be thinking in your head, Pastor, hang on a minute. Why are you sharing these depressing news with us? But I just want to remind you, my brothers and my sisters, the Bible says in Psalm 30, verse 5, weeping may endure for the night. What comes in the morning? Joy comes in the morning. You see, last week at this time, we got news that Sunita's cousin was diagnosed with COVID-19. You see, many people don't see the depth of it unless they would see their loved one go through it. Then they will understand. Last week, we got news that he contracted COVID-19. We panicked. But today, he's rejoicing. He's happy. He's fit. He's leaping like a gazelle and start trying to clean his house and everything. Only 1 week. But do you know why? I like to share 3 important solutions to this pandemic, to this COVID-19, to this deadly virus. The first one is prayer. The second one is prayer. And the third one is prayer. So to cut all these stories short here, in simple, God has touched him. Why God has touched him? Because we have prayed for him. Yes. Today my message is very simple. You know it. But I'm going to preach it in a different way. I want to preach it in a first person narrative sermon. So the story as a whole is in the book of Luke, chapter 5 and verse 12. I am not going to read it because I know that you know the story very well. I would like to share it with you in a first person sermon. But before we do that, let me just do a short prayer. Father, may the word of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight. My Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen. I am a Jew. I am a Jew. And I live in Israel all my life. I was 36 years old and this tragedy happened. I was working as a carpenter. Today many people call this profession as a builder. My parents actually, they helped me a lot, to buy a small land as a carpenter, as a builder. So I built a small house on it, very cozy, big enough with nice little garden. Life was good. I had a job. I had a beautiful home. Everything was working fine. After a few years of marriage, we got 2 children. My eldest one is a boy, and this time he was about 5 years old, and his name is Samuel. And Sarah is my little princess, and she was 2 years old. And Rachel was 6 months pregnant. You know, Rachel is my wife, and she was 6 months pregnant. You know, for my third baby. So we were so happy. You know, in those days, women don't normally go to work, you see. So their husband will go and earn the money, and they will stay at home, and they will take care of the home business, you know, taking care of the kids and preparing the food. You know, life wasn't just like it is now, you know, that you go to the supermarket, you got all these ready-made food. It wasn't like this. So you need to prepare. There's a lot of work, you know, to prepare a meal. So you know, that's how it was. So I was dealing, you know, with my job, and business was really good, I must say, because you know, in those days not many people were carpenter as such as builder, you know. So I was working hard, of course, especially, you know, a third baby on the way. And one day I came home, finished working, and had my shower, and we're having dinner. And Rachel was with me here. We're having dinner together. And Rachel noticed a small sore, you know, on my hand. And she asked me about it. And I did not notice before. So I said to her that it was probably a small scratch, you know, and that I didn't pay attention to it, you know. You know, being a builder, you see, you work, you know, with these, you know, concrete, you know, all these kind of things. So you know, it probably got a small scratch or something like this. So in those days, you know, we didn't have proper equipment, of course, you know, like gloves that we have today, and you know, protection, you know, that we have. And so I comforted her, and I said, well, not to worry about it. It's okay. Things is all right. It's everything. It should be okay. So I took it easy at work for a couple of days, and but when the sore was growing larger and larger, but it was not painful at all. You know, it was growing, but it was not painful. So after a few days, however, we got alarmed, you know, and Rachel persuaded me to go and to see the priest in the town who knows about such things. You know, it wasn't like today that you go to the doctor, but you know, when you have this kind of disease, you go and see the priest. And so he says to me, well, let's go and see the priest. So of course, those days, the priests, there are some of the priests who, you know, were specialists in a sense. They are trained when it comes to skin infection. So he proposed that I should stay away, you know, a little bit from everybody for 2 weeks, and would observe the soul, you know. 2 weeks for me was quite a long time, you know. I think he was saying, like, you know, you need quarantine and something like this. You know, I was not very familiar with the word, but you know, for 2 weeks you need to be in quarantine, and you know, you can't see your family at all. You know, you can't spend time with them, you know, at all. So in those days, you know, this was the procedure, you know, and it was common, especially, you know, for these kind of the skin diseases, you know. So after 2 weeks, the sore grew bigger and bigger until it is almost covers my whole hand. It becomes white around, just around the edge there, it became white, you know. And it was not that painful as it looks, but it sure looks horrible. I'm telling you, horrible. You know, at the end of these 2 weeks, the priest was a bit annoyed with me somehow. And he said that you need to confess your sin. And I'm just scratching my head. You know, why are you asking me to confess my sin? And ask him why. Why do I have to confess my sin? You know. And he told me, I have figured out, you know, what is the soul, what's happened to you, but I am sorry to inform you that you have leprosy. and I pronounce you today unclean. And of course, a priest, he knows the Levitical law, what Moses wrote, especially if you would go there in the book of, in the Bible there, the 5 book of Moses, under the name of Pentateuch, the priest was telling me Pentateuch, something like this. I think the 5 book of Moses. And he was telling me there's something called a book called Leviticus there, chapter 13, something like this. Yes. He asked me if I know the story of Miriam, Miriam. And that was a prophet by the name of Moses, the one who wrote the book, and Miriam was a sister. So I don't know much about the story of Miriam. So I was in shock. Me, why would I know the story? You just told me I've got leprosy now. Why would I know who Miriam is, So I was in shock and was not paying attention really what he was saying to me. So then he took his notebook, and read this verse from the Pentateuch, the book of Numbers this time, 12, verse 12 and 9 to 12. So I'm going to read it for you. If you don't have your Bible, I'm going to read it for you. Let me put my glasses. I need to wear glasses now. It's getting old. Well, where we're reading here, Numbers is there. I'm nearly there now. Numbers chapter 12, and we're looking about, verse 9 to 12. Verse 9 to 12. Numbers chapter 12 and verse 9 to 12. All right, here it says, "Do you hear the anger of the Lord burn against them? And he left them. When the cloud lifted up from above the tent, there stood Miriam, leprous like snow. Aaron turned towards her and saw that she had leprosy. And he said to Moses, please, my Lord, do not hold against us the sin we have so foolishly committed. Do not let her be like a stillborn infant coming from its mother's womb with its flesh half eaten away." Wow, that's really powerful. In the mind of the priest there, of those people in those days. So if you have leprosy, you're a sinner. So after reading this, he told me that only God can help me. He told me that no physician or any good doctors won't be able to treat this disease. They won't. And I don't know if that is familiar with COVID-19, when this is, there is no treatment for it. There's no treatment. Is your immune system, and also only God can do that. Well, he told me, for the sake of all people, and not only people, of animals, you need to leave your family, you need to leave your wife, you need to leave your children, you need to leave your land, you need to leave your home, you need to leave your job, and go off to live with the lepers outside the town. Wow. You imagine this. Can you get the picture into your hand there? So after hearing this, I was terrified. My world collapsed. This was worse than death. A death sentence will be easier. And the process of dying by leprosy is worse than dying itself. So I asked him if I could go and share the horrible news, at least with my wife, and at least to kiss and say goodbye, because she's worried now. It's been 2 weeks now and I haven't been there. But you know what he said to me? He said to me, I am sorry, but I will be straight with you. Until you got healed, you cannot go home. You cannot go home to hold your wife in your arms again. You will not be able to wrestle with your son again. You cannot kiss your little girl goodnight again. You will not be able to see your newborn baby. No, you can't help in supporting your family anymore. If you see them and if you touch them, they may get leprosy themselves. So if you love them, you will never get near to them again. Now you have a new family, because the family that you have has been taken away from you. Now you have a new family, and this family live outside the village. They are the lepers family. Just before he asked me to leave, he gave me a piece of paper. I had it somewhere. He gave me a piece of paper, and in this paper there was a story of Naaman. A Syrian man by the name of Naaman had been healed from leprosy. And this is in the Old Testament. You can read the story if you want to in Second King. And I think it's in chapter 5. If you read it there, Second King chapter 5, there's a beautiful story of a man who has been healed from God. So this is the hope that he have given to me. There is no other way. No doctors, no physician, nothing. But my hope was there was a man by the name of Naaman been healed before in the past. Well, maybe you're thinking, well, what is that leprosy? Let me explain what is leprosy a little bit. In Palestine, there were two kinds of leprosy. There was one which was rather like a very bad skin rash, disease, and it was less serious. It wasn't that serious. But the other one was a lethal one, and it started like, a small spot there. It's very tiny, and sometimes when you look at this COVID-19, you can't even see it with your eyes. It's so tiny, a very small spot there. Then with time, it ate away the flesh, In most cases, the body of the person just rot to pieces while the person continued to live, It is a dreadful disease that causes damage to the body, nervous system, the whole system. And as a result, leprosy simply causes you not to be able to feel anything. Leprosy may eventually cause your whole body to go numb. So when someone is blind, they cannot see. When someone is deaf, they cannot hear. But someone has leprosy, they cannot feel. The infected part of the body goes numb and eventually loses all sensitivity. It was literally a living death. It was a living death, yes. But this was not terrified, enough. Let me tell you what I wasn't afraid of dying, I was not afraid of the process leading up to it, but I was afraid of the complete separation and isolation that is about to begin in my life. You see, although the physical ravages of leprosy are bad, but the mental pressure, the social interaction, and the emotional damage that contributed to it causes it even worse. It's not only physical, it's emotional, it's social, you name it. The mental pressure that you have, Well, lepers were required to keep far away possible from all healthy people. You see, they cannot come into contact. They have to be very far. Whenever in ignorance, someone, without this disease will draw close to you, and the leper was supposed to shout, "Unclean, unclean." This disease was so infectious. Lepers are never allowed to be near their loved one again. That is what it is. And we cannot debate this. You cannot come. So I was so sad. You imagine that pressure now. So I started my journey to rot and to die. Yes, I remember the day. Very painful, very painful. I couldn't even have my dog for a companion. If I patted the head of my dog, my dog had to be put to death. They had to kill my dog because the dog might carry the disease to the city. So my life have become so miserable. Can you imagine this life what I'm speaking about now? You know, my family, I can't earn, I can't do anything, I can't provide for myself. My family would come and bring food for me every day, but they couldn't get close. They would leave it at a certain place far on a rock or on a stone, and they will go. Then I would go and pick it up and eat it. In this way, I watched my children growing up, yet was never able to touch them, to play with them, to speak with them. I watched my wife crying all the time when she left the food, but I couldn't comfort her. I could not speak to her. After several years of this, I started wishing they wouldn't come anymore. It wasn't that I didn't want to see them. That's not the problem. It was that I didn't want them to see me, because by this time I have lost several of my fingers already and my toes, and my face was horribly disfigured. My hair was falling out. You see, according to the Jewish law, I should wear rags for clothes. My hair was to be uncovered and disheveled, and I should cover my face with a cloth. Well, you can read this in Leviticus chapter 13 and verse 45. That's exactly what it tells you there. So I look repulsive, and I didn't want my family to remember me in this way. It is associated with shame and horror, and it carries in some mysterious way a sense of guilt, although innocently acquired, like most contagious trouble. You see, you don't ask to get COVID. That's not your choice. You see, the only prayers I prayed so I could die. Then one day something happened so that my family and I and the neighborhood would never forget. No, they never forget. Let me tell you now what happened. Yes. One afternoon, I looked towards the hill there, and there I saw a small group of people following a man. And the man was teaching them as they were walking. So I heard the man's name mentioned. They called him Jesus. Yes. I heard about him a lot. People said that he's a teacher coming from God, doing many miracles. So I wanted to look at him. But of course, remember, I'm a leper. You know, I couldn't go close to there. I couldn't even see from a distance. By then, my vision wasn't really good. So I couldn't go too close. How horrible it is. Even the hope is there. I couldn't go and reach the hope. Jesus and the man with him were getting closer. And I was aware of the ceremonial law by then, because people had been treating me so bad, you see. And I was worse than an animal. People treated us, the lepers, was looked down upon. So I start shouting, unclean, unclean, stay away from me. I have leprosy, unclean. I keep shouting more louder and louder. And just like 1,000 times before, the men that was with Jesus, they shrunk back, they stopped, because I have been calling, unclean, unclean. But something strange happened, even as the other men drew back. But this great teacher, Jesus, kept coming closer. As he was coming closer, unclean, I shouted louder, up to my voice, unclean. Sir, I'm unclean. Stop. But Jesus kept coming. I'm thinking in myself, in my mind, does he not know the law? I thought to myself, if Jesus get any closer, he will become unclean himself. If he come closer to me, he might become my body. He might get leprosy. And I start covering myself in rags so I could hold it away, from Jesus. But by then, Jesus was too close enough. So when I turn my face like this to see if he's still coming, I could see in his eyes. I make contact in his eyes. Then I saw something there that I haven't seen in any other human being for many, 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 many years. I didn't see low things. I saw concern. I didn't see fear, but I saw sympathy. I didn't see rejection, but I saw love. And when I saw this in the eyes of Jesus, I fell on my face and implored him, saying, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. I made my request. Immediately, he granted me my request. Then I remember he put out his hand like this and he touched me. And he said, I am willing. Be cleansed. Immediately, leprosy left me. You see, I'm telling you the story. Maybe many don't believe the story, but I'm here. Just somehow, Jesus somehow understood my pain. And he knew that nobody have touched me for a very long time. That touch was needed. He knew that I couldn't even pet my dog without being put this dog to death. He put his hand out and he touched me. I also question why he did it. Why he did it. He could simply say the word. Later I heard that he healed the centurion servant with his word. If you read, we're reading in Luke chapter 5. If you go to chapter 7, you will read the story there. Why he touched me. Why Jesus did this. Well, it was a radical thing for him to do. You see, according to Jewish law, if a person touches someone who is unclean, they become unclean also. So why Jesus did this? Why Jesus touched me? You see, this is very clean. This is very clear in Leviticus chapter 5 and verse 2. You see, I was rejected. I was treated like unclean. Many people consider me worse than garbage. Many considered me a great sinner because I've got leprosy. I was living in fear. I was despised. I was neglected and scorned. Why he touched me? All people looked down upon me. Well, he did not heal me for the sake of his fame. Not because he wanted fame. He did this because he told me not to go and tell anyone about it. But he told me something. He said to me, go and show yourself to the priest with an offering. He did this for my sake. He had compassion on me and simply wanted to show me his love. He was not scared of my sores or put off by my rotting and smelly flesh. the touch of Jesus said, I am here for you. I am here with you. I sympathize with you when no one else does. I understand the pain, he said. I understand the sorrows, the agony that you are going through. I thought in my heart that he must love me. I did not know him. After he told me to go and to show myself to the priest, before getting back into the society, the person must go and have to go through different steps for them to get back into the society. The first one is to go and see the priest, because it was the priest's duty to examine the individual to determine if whether they still have the disease or not. Are they clean or they're not clean? You know, the command to silence follows the pattern noted in chapter 4 in verse 41. Jesus wanted first to do the work of the Messiah and to fulfill his basic mission as a sacrificial suffering before being publicly proclaimed as a Messiah. The healing of lepers is one of the messianic sign that John the Baptist in prison was reminded. You see, why he touched me. I couldn't go to him. He came for me. Have you ever felt like a leper? Are you experiencing rejection? Are you in pain? Are you critically sick? Or your loved one? Are you struggling with finances or anything like this? If you are, let me tell you, my brothers and sisters, I have good news for you. Call out to Jesus, because he's more willing to touch you today. His touch is so powerful enough to restore everything and anything beyond your imagination. What is it? Is it your health? Is it physical health? Is it spiritual health? Is it social, emotional, mental? What is it? Is it your marriage? Is it your relationship? You name it. You name it. God can do it. Jesus came to this world to show us that he's concerned for us. John 3:16 says, for God so loved the world that he gave his son. God loves us so much. Call out to Jesus today, my brothers and sisters, because he's more willing to heal and to restore you than your willingness to ask him. And I'm confident in saying he will do the same, because he did it for me. I must say, my darkness was over with the touch of Jesus. Now I can understand the scripture when John said in John chapter 1 and verse 5, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness could not comprehend it. My brothers, COVID is here. That's darkness. But amidst in that COVID, there's a light is shining, and this light is Jesus. Jesus touched the untouchable. His hand went out to the man from whom everyone else would have shrunk away. Yes, but Jesus would do it. I would like to leave you with two things today. First, when we despise ourselves, when our hearts are filled with bitter shame, let us remember that in spite of all, Jesus Christ, his hand is still stretched out. And you see, the second one is of a very essence of Christianity, to touch the untouchable, to love the unlovable, to forgive the unforgivable. This is what we have to do. But the main thing, as we are going through this darkness, it's not over yet. We don't know tomorrow what's going to happen. But what I'm telling you here, there is hope, because God is our hope. Men won't touch you, but God is always there. I have heard many people lost their lives because of this COVID-19. But you know, I heard also many people lived also. Do you know how many people I heard that they had COVID-19, but many of them are alive? And do you know why? Because God touched them. My message for tonight is we have hope in this darkness. We have hope in this darkness because we have God on our side. May God bless you. Have a good evening. Happy Sabbath.